The General Overseas Service of All India Radio presents readings from an autobiography or the story of my experiments with truth. The reading from the autobiography is presented by Sri Gopalkrishna Gandhi, writer, teacher, and the youngest grandson of Kasturba Gandhi and Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. The words of the Mahatma in the voice of his grandson.
About this time, Shrijut Madanjit approached me with the proposals to start Indian Opinion and sought my advice. He had already been conducting a press and I approved of his proposal. The journal was launched in 1904. The journal has served the community well. It was never intended to be a commercial concern. So long as it was under my control, the changes in the journal were indicative of changes in my life. Indian Opinion in those days, like Young India and Navajivan today, was a mirror of part of my life. Week after week, I poured out my soul in its columns and expounded the principles and practice of Satyagraha as I understood it. Satyagraha campaign as also the real conditions of Indians in South Africa. For me, it became a means for the study of human nature in all its castes and shades, as I always aimed at establishing an intimate and clean bond between the editor and readers. I was inundated with letters containing the outpourings of my correspondents' hearts. They were friendly, critical, or bitter, according to the temper of the writer. It was a fine education for me to study, digest, and answer all this correspondence. It was as though the community thought audibly through this correspondence with me. The newspaper press is a great power, but just as an unchained torrent of water submerges whole countrysides and devastates crops, even so an uncontrolled pen serves but to destroy. If the control is from without, it proves more poisonous than want of control. It can be profitable only when exercised from within. If this line of reasoning is correct, how many of the journals in the world would stand the test? But who would stop those that are useless? And who should be the judge? The useful and the useless must, like good and evil, generally go on together, and man must make his choice. Some of the classes which render us the greatest social service, but which we Hindus have chosen to regard as untouchables, are relegated to remote quarters of a town or a village, called in Gujarati Dhedwado, and the name has acquired a bad odor. Even so, in Christian Europe, the Jews were once untouchables, and the quarters that were assigned to them had the offensive name of ghettos. In a similar way today, we have become untouchables of South Africa, and the quarters assigned to the coolies are called coolie locations. People were densely packed in the location, the area of which never increased with the increase in population. Beyond arranging to clean the latrines in the location in a haphazard way, the municipality did nothing to provide any sanitary facilities. The criminal negligence of the municipality and the ignorance of the Indian settlers thus conspired to render the location thoroughly insanitary. There was a sudden outbreak of the Black Plague, also called the pneumonic plague, more terrible and fatal than the bubonic. One of the gold mines in the vicinity of Johannesburg was responsible for the outbreak. A few Indians working in the mine caught the infection. I had nursed a number of patients before, but never any attacked by the Black Plague. On the outbreak of the plague, I addressed a strong letter to the press, holding the municipality guilty of negligence after the location came into its possession and responsible for the outbreak of the plague. The letter secured me Mr. Henry Pollack. I used to have my meals at a vegetarian restaurant. Here I met Mr. Albert West. We used to meet in this restaurant every evening and go on walking after dinner. I made the acquaintance of Mr. Pollock in the vegetarian restaurant, just as I had made that of Mr. West. One evening, a young man dining at a table a little way off sent me his card expressing a desire to see me. I invited him to come to my table, which he did. Mr. Pollock's candor drew me to him. The same evening, we got to know each other. We seemed to hold similar views on the essential things of life. He liked the simple life. Indian opinion was getting more and more expensive every day. I left for Natal. I had taken Mr. Pollock into my fullest confidence. He came to see me off at the station and left me with a book to read during the journey, which he said I was sure to like. It was Ruskin's Unto This Last. The book was impossible to lay aside once I had begun it. It gripped me. This was the first book of Ruskin I had ever read. During the days of my education, I had read practically nothing outside textbooks, and after I launched into active life, I had very little time for reading. I cannot therefore claim much book knowledge. However, I believe I have not lost much because of this enforced restraint. On the contrary, the limited reading may be said to have enabled me thoroughly to digest what I did read. Of these books, the one that brought about an instantaneous and practical transformation in my life was Unto This Last. I later translated it into Gujarati, entitling it Sarvodaya, the welfare of all. The teaching of Unto This Last I understood to be 1. That the good of the individual is contained in the good of all. 2. That a lawyer's work has the same value as the barber's, inasmuch as all have the same right of earning their livelihood from their work. 3. That a life of labor, which is the life of the tiller of the soil and the handicraftsman, is the life worth living. I talked over the whole thing with Mr. West, described to him the effect of Unto This Last had produced on my mind, and proposed that Indian opinion should be removed to a farm on which everyone should labor, drawing the same living wage and attending to the press work in spare time.
You just heard the reading from the Autobiography of Mahatma Gandhi, presented by Shri Gopalkrishna Gandhi, the youngest grandson of Kasturba Gandhi and Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi.